region. It's tropical, it's mystical, but most of all, it's blue. Hoenn has some of the most distinct atmosphere in the entire Pokemon series, with some of the most unique towns and routes. Traversing Hoenn feels like a genuine adventure, and so much of the region is just imbued by this level of creativity that's just unmatched by the other regions. Full disclosure though, I am extremely biased because I grew up on Gen 3 and it's just extremely nostalgic, but because of that nostalgia, Hoenn is the region that I know the best. So I want to share everything that I love about this fictional place by going over what makes the atmosphere of all the towns and routes, and how all of that culminates to just create the most immaculate vibes. Let's start out where every Hoenn adventure begins, in Littleroot Town. It genuinely feels like this little tiny community just tucked away in the trees. And the little flowers, that little pop of color to just contrast with all the green around you. It just does so much for the ambiance, you know? And that music just absolutely nails that hometown serenity. That peaceful hopefulness from knowing that your grand journey is about to unfold. It all comes together perfectly. The next notable route to me is Route 104, but it's not just that route, it's the combination of it plus Petalburg Woods and then straight into Rustboro City that gives you the feeling of just how diverse that Hoenn can be. It's a very quaint little seaside shack with Mr. Briny living there, directly next to like a super mysterious forest. I know it's probably not like that mysterious, but the music to me is very mysterious vibes. But that also leads to big city, Rustboro City, which is like one of the biggest ones in the region. And Rustboro itself, to delve a little bit more into that, feels super unique because yeah, it's a big city like I said, but it's also kind of small town in a way. I mean, yeah, it's got these big buildings, but it's also got these small little details, like this little garden in the middle of the city, the little water fountain, the way that the sidewalk or cement or whatever just kind of fizzles back into the grass of the other routes. And then having that like slightly pastel yellow, kind of off-white color instead of like an industrial gray prevents it from having such a big city vibe, like for example Castelia City does. The whole place is just understated in a way that few other big cities in Pokemon are, and that's like a good thing. Dewford Town continues to really hammer in both the tropical vibes and the small town vibes all in one, but that's in stark contrast to what's next, Slateport Beach. I mean, this is a full-on beach. This is the closest I've ever felt to being in Florida while playing a video game. There's beach goers, there's beach chairs, there's beach umbrellas, beach floaties, there's even a beach soda shop with little inner tubes that you can use for the beach. This beach just feels like such a beach. And Slateport City itself might have like the most seaside nautical vibes of anywhere like in any game ever. There's a lighthouse, there's ships docked, there's a shipyard where they work on the ships. There's a harbor with a little bubble design. There's even an entire museum dedicated to the ocean. It's called the Oceanic Museum. And it's got these little dioramic submarines and more ships, dioramic ones, and everything inside and out has all these different shades of blue and turquoise and aqua. Oh, and also I can't forget the little market, which is just bursting with color. It's just so lively. It feels like there's just some sort of festival going on 24/7, and I love that about it. Verdant I swear I could just smell it, dude. I mean, there's flowers everywhere. Like, I can't stress enough how peaceful, serene, tranquil, every vocabulary word that means that exact same thing Verdant Town is. And that goes for so many places in Hoenn. And that extra little layer of grass that they add here adds that just little bit of flair of style. I mean, in this shot alone, there are 4 different textures of grass. The tall grass, the regular walking tile grass, the extra grass, and then the flowers. And this is how they transform another just little grassy path into something more stylized and special. And then if you go north of Mauville, everything starts to get more rockier and craggier until it's like, oh shoot, I'm in a desert now. And they fake you out. It's like, no, there's no way you can go that way. That's a desert. You're not going to survive that. And it's like, okay, yes, good point. Let me go this way instead. And then you're in an active volcano. And then when you're in the volcano, the rocks are tinted with this like little shade of red. These don't just look like rocks. These are hot rocks. And inside this fiery path is literal smoke. Fire. It's like I can genuinely feel like that beachy humidity kind of hot turn into this smoky, more stale, burning kind of hot. It's still hot. It's just a different kind of hot. And again, I just have to stress, they're doing all this atmosphere and world building with pixel art. It's just so impressive. And then it continues to transform into something entirely unique, Route 113. At first it looks like it's snowing here, which would be completely antithetical to everything we know about Hoenn so far, when in actuality, as we all know, it's volcanic ash, which gives the route entirely new context. But it still looks the opposite of everything we've seen. It looks cold and gray and desaturated, as opposed to like the bright blues and greens that we're used to by this point. This route, in the entire region for that matter, is just a masterclass on the use of color and saturation. And it's so small, but you also have this little new kind of tree design here, which just adds to this route having its own personality. And you can also like collect and uncover all the ash. Makes you feel like you're exploring some like uncharted territory or something. And the whole thing, it transcends everything. I don't know, man. Route 113 just has such a hold on me. I love this route so much. It's so creative. It feels magical and important for just another route along your journey. And yeah, maybe it is just another route, but to me, and to I think a lot of other people out there, it's a lot more special than that. And next up is Meteor Falls, which depending on the version you're playing, either feels like a pretty normal cave or one made out of solid gold. But the one I have to admit I like the most is the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire version. The 3D lends itself really, really well to like the ethereal glow of the water, specifically like in this cave. And it's like the most crystal clear water you'll ever see in your entire life in a video game. Again, it feels special, almost ceremonial even. It's almost so perfect it feels like you're not supposed to be there for some reason. And it is Meteor Falls, so it's like it's got that alien element to it. And speaking of which, what's this purple goo? Someone in the comments, please tell me, what is the purple goo? And then if we backtrack a little bit, we can take the cable car up to the top of Mount Chimney. And I don't care what anyone says. I don't care. Best cutscene in gaming. And then when you get to the top, it's snowing again. Or ashing, I guess. And then you can look directly down into the molten lava, which, yeah, I think someone probably should put up some like guardrails or something right here. Oh, and by the way, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. It would be a real shame if someone accidentally fell down into that lava right there, considering, you know, there's no guardrails. I mean, if you didn't subscribe, that might just happen. Jokes aside, having the look of the snow, which, again, as we all know, it's not actually snow, but let's just go with it, directly on top of a pool of lava, it's perfect juxtaposition. It creates a feeling that, like, didn't exist before. From the top of Mount Chimney, you can descend down through the jagged pass down to Lavaridge Town. And also, Jagged Pass, hardcore name by the way, and just another really cool area. Also very creative to have it be a one-way street unless you have the acrobike. Like, that's just really good exploration, region design, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, it leads to Lavaridge Town, home of the hot springs. And if you have ever played this game without taking a second to just like stop and soak in the water with the old ladies in the hot springs, well, I think you're insane. And it also might be like the smallest of details, but I always love the little entrance they had in the Pokemon Center to the hot springs, with like the little trees and the little curtain. It just made it feel more special, you know? Normally Pokemon Centers are like the exact same thing every time, but this one's like, it's got that little bit of difference, and that makes it feel really cool. The warmth of Lavaridge Town just emanates through the Game Boy. I have to remind myself that I'm not like actually sweating when I'm passing through here. Oh. I also just like how everyone here is old. That was a nice touch. Shout out to all those old people communities in Florida. You have video game representation. But now it's time to skip on over and go to one of the more tropical places in Hoenn, Route 119. The combination of like all the tall grass and the rain just makes it feel like you're exploring some actual jungle. I mean, it feels more like a rainforest than Rainforest Cafe ever has. And the deeper you go into the forest, you reach Fortree City. Still up there as like one of the best towns in the entire franchise, maybe even the best. Everyone lives in tree houses here. It's every kid's dream to live in a tree house. I mean, it's a trope across like a ton of cartoons, and they turn it into like a full-on town here. And it's still kind of modern in a way. I mean, they have TVs inside the houses. I love how most of it is like also raised up too. It's not just like a town in the trees in the forest. It's a town literally in the trees. And it's just so fun to walk around on the little rope bridges. The sound effects also, that's a big part of that. I also love like the texture of the ground kind of covered in these leaves. Again, it's like all these little details that just add up to create such a deep immersive environment. And after Fortree City is Route 120, which kind of has this like rainforesty, high adventure vibes like Route 119. but also with an element of tranquility like Bird and Turf Town. After exploring like a funky little tall grass maze, the rain stops, the sun comes out, and you open up into this little clearing, and there's these little like pale blue puddles everywhere, and they're kind of reflecting like the sky's light blue, and you can see the clouds in them. The game kind of like gives you this moment to kind of stop and literally reflect, just like the puddles are reflecting the sky above, because it's been a long journey. And I don't even know if this was like intentional, but to me, it's a really cool metaphor. And this area just kind of gives me hopeful vibes, you know? And again, I just love that about it. And nearby is Mount Pyre, somewhere a lot less hopeful, unfortunately. It's a cemetery island mountain just sitting there in the ocean. Again, they just never stop with the creativity. Who puts a cemetery on a little mountain island? It's a lot more than just a graveyard, as we've seen tons of just graveyards across the series. And then you have the fog outside, which gets like thicker the higher up you go, which makes sense because, you know, like clouds at like high altitudes and fog equals spooky and scary and Halloween. And then, yeah, don't forget the headstones that are everywhere. It just nails that eerie, unsettling feeling. Oh yeah, and then you have the legendary ancient orbs at the top, guarded by the old people. And when you got old people guarding stuff, you know it's serious. And then you go into Lilycove City, which is basically, I'd call it this region's like big city, just because it has the mall. It's like always the big city that has the mall. But at the same time, it doesn't really feel like that. It's not even concrete like Rustboro. It's mostly grass everywhere. And while there isn't really much else going on in Lilycove, like I guess design-wise and aesthetic-wise, I think now is a good time to mention the diversity of the houses in Hoenn. And I know that sounds weird, but just hear me out. Have you ever seen this specific like kind of blue house before, like in this video or exploring Hoenn, besides in Lilycove? No, you haven't. That's because each house is unique to each town. It's a really, really small detail that's super easy to miss, but it gives each town its own personality, and it really just accentuates the uniqueness of every single city and town in Hoenn. And one of my personal favorite house designs is Moss Deep City. They look kind of like metallic, which is very fitting for Moss Deep's like space and rocket ship kind of theme, and combined with like the swampiness of all the trees and like the marshy beach and everything, it makes a very unique little island. Now, for as many different water and sea routes that there are in Hoenn, if you could tell me the difference between these two, I'd honestly be extremely impressed. And this is basically like the only bad thing I could say about Hoenn. But yeah, the water routes, they really do kind of blend together, and they just don't have that much special about them, unfortunately. However, the ability to go underwater adds another layer of depth to exploring these routes. With a completely new look, different Pokemon, different music, the way that the seaweed moves, and like the bubbles kind of come up whenever you pass through them. You know, I've never been deep sea diving myself, but this is exactly how I imagine it would be. I'm sure they nailed the feeling. It really does feel like you're underwater. And of course, you have to go underwater to get to Slateport City, which is carved out of a volcano, or a meteor if you're playing Oris, where the whole place has this like ancient vibe to it, and all the rocks are this ashy, bleached color, and the houses genuinely look like they're carved out of that stone, which perfectly accentuates the ancient vibe. And if you cross the sea far enough, you'll eventually reach Pacifidlog Town. Pacifidlog, I can't say that. Where all the townsfolk are literally living in the middle of the ocean. Pacifidlog is the epitome of the cool little details that I've been talking about. The way the logs kind of sink a little bit whenever you walk on them, the little ripples of the houses and logs floating on the water, the way you can kind of see like the water underneath the flooring inside the houses, and the architecture just speaks for itself. Wooden plank houses, thatch roofs, everything is so unique and fleshed out for a town that's literally entirely skippable. It's here solely for the purpose of adding to the culture and tropical theme of Hoenn, and it excels at doing just that. And last but not least, where every Hoenn adventure ends, Grande City, which isn't, you know, if you really think about it, much of an actual city, but it does do a really good job of like hyping up the end of the game. It really amplifies the grandness of reaching the Pokemon League, with all the flowers everywhere, the cobblestone walls, the little archways, well, not little archways, the big archways. And the whole flower theme is really cool to me because flowers sort of symbolize, you know, like blooming, beginning, but this is the end of the journey. Overall, it makes reaching the end of the game feel more like a pleasant celebration than, you know, something to be sad over because it's over. To tie everything together, Hoenn is defined by its biodiversity in the way that it juxtaposes these vastly different environments. And more than anything, The way that they cram these perfect little details into every corner of the region. And it makes Hoenn feel so exciting, but also so peaceful, and altogether just alive, all at the same time. On top of that, Hoenn completely embraces nature. The people here coexist with the natural world. Compared to other regions, Hoenn easily has like the least amount of cities and big skyscrapers and all that sort of stuff. Instead, the people here integrate their communities into nature. The forests, the mountains, the ocean, active volcanoes and inactive volcanoes. And that makes it feel like the people and the Pokemon coexist here in a way that's surprisingly rare for the series. I hope you enjoyed this little review of all the aesthetics of the Hoenn region, and if you did, please feel free to subscribe and like the video, it helps out a ton. So now if you'll excuse me, I'm going on vacation to Hoenn.